After losing his mother, a boy refuses to eat and plunges into deep sorrow. His father, desperate, had already tried everything to help him without success. But everything changes when a simple cleaning lady enters the house and does something unexpected. With a piece of bread and a sincere heart, she brings life back to that family. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Thaddeus Meadows' mansion, high in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles, was known among architects as a monument to genius. With its modernist lines and perfect integration with the surrounding nature, the residence had already graced specialized magazines worldwide. Now, however, what reigned there was a sepulchral silence that contrasted with the bustle of the metropolis below. It was the 30th day since the accident at the construction site of the new Cultural Center on Fifth Avenue, New York City. 30 days since Eliza Davies Meadows, Thaddeus's wife and mother of little Matthew, 1 year and 7 months old, had passed away forever. 30 days since the boy had put any food in his mouth. "Dr. Maxwell, I need concrete answers," Thaddeus's voice echoed through the library where he received the renowned pediatrician. "We've already consulted 3 specialists and nothing. My son will disappear before my eyes." The doctor, with graying hair and a compassionate look behind his Italian-framed glasses, sighed as he closed the medical chart. "Thaddeus, all tests indicate that Matthew is physically healthy. There's no obstruction, no identifiable organic disease. What we have here is a psychological response to trauma." The doctor paused. "Your son is grieving. And how is that treated?" Thaddeus asked, nervously running a hand through his disheveled hair, something unthinkable for anyone who had known him before. Always impeccably dressed in his tailored suits. He needs an emotional reason to live. We need to reach his emotional side, not his physical. The private nurse, Mrs. Celia, who accompanied Matthew day and night, entered the library without knocking, something she would never do under other circumstances. "Mr. Thaddeus, I apologize, but the boy refused the baby food again. He didn't even accept the chocolate ice cream." Thaddeus leaned back in the leather armchair, rubbing his face with both hands. The signs of exhaustion and hopelessness were evident in his deep, dark circles. "How much longer can he last like this, doctor? Be honest with me." The doctor put his stethoscope back into his leather bag before answering. "Parenteral nutrition is maintaining the basics, but it's not a long-term solution. We need a turnaround in this situation in days, not weeks." He paused meaningfully. "Thaddeus, I'll be direct. You need to stop running away. Your son feels your emotional absence. You are physically present but emotionally absent." Thaddeus stood up abruptly. "I'm doing everything I can. I hired the best professionals in the country, bought the best food, suspended all my projects." His voice trembled. "What more do they want from me?" "That you forgive yourself," the doctor replied without mincing words. "That you stop punishing yourself for having taken Eliza to that construction site. That you truly be present for your son." Thaddeus paled as if he had been physically struck. "Get out of my house." The doctor didn't argue. He picked up his bag and left, exchanging a meaningful look with Mrs. Celia, who merely shook her head, disheartened. On the upper floor of the mansion, in the room decorated in shades of blue and green, little Matthew stared fixedly at the window. He no longer cried. He barely moved much. Apathy had replaced even despair. In the spacious kitchen with industrial equipment, Rita, the housekeeper, was discussing with Sophie, the cook. "We've tried everything." "Everything?" "Even that imported formula from Switzerland that cost a fortune," Sophie lamented, putting away the untouched food jars once again. "And he just turns his little face away. Doesn't even open his mouth. It's heartbreaking," Rita added, drying her hands on her apron. "And the boss? Getting worse and worse. He doesn't sleep, barely eats either. He stays locked in the office looking at those architectural plans or in the boys' room, not knowing what to do." The kitchen phone rang, interrupting their conversation. Rita answered quickly. "Hello? Yes, this is Mr. Meadows' residence." She frowned. "What do you mean she's not coming?" "But what about the weekly cleaning?" Her tone hardened. "I understand that personal problems happen, but advance notice would be the professional minimum." Sophie watched, concerned. When Rita hung up, she burst out, "Don't tell me the company cleaner cancelled again." "She did. Said her daughter has a fever, and she has no one to leave her with. Rita sighed deeply. And right today, when I need to organize everything for Mrs. Martha's visit tomorrow. Martha Davies, Eliza's mother and Matthew's grandmother, was an imposing and critical presence, especially since what happened to her daughter. Her visits always left the entire household staff on edge. And now? Sophie asked. I'm going to call the agency and demand someone for today, even if it's just for half a day. 2 hours later, the mansion's intercom rang. Rita answered, and after a brief conversation opened the electronic gate. A woman of approximately 45, with features marked by the deep south sun, dark skin and black hair tied in a simple bun, entered carrying a modest bag. She wore a simple blue uniform, clean but visibly used. Good afternoon. I'm Iris Newman. The agency sent me to cover today's service. She introduced herself with an accent that betrayed her Louisiana origins. Rita examined her from head to toe, not hiding a certain distrust. The agency didn't inform us you were coming. Do you have identification? Iris opened her bag and showed her ID badge from the Domestic Services Company. They called urgently. I'm replacing the young woman who couldn't come. Rita checked the document and reluctantly gestured for her to enter. Very well. I'll show you what needs to be done. As they walked down the sumptuous corridor, Rita laid down the rules. First, absolute silence. There's a sick child in the house. Second, limit yourself to the rooms I indicate. Third and most important, under no circumstances go upstairs to the second floor. Iris merely nodded, taking in the mansion's grandeur with attentive eyes. There was something in her gaze. It wasn't admiration or intimidation as Rita expected, but a kind of silent understanding. Any questions? Rita inquired. No, madam. I can start right away. As she cleaned the enormous living room, Iris observed the details that told stories. The photo frames turned face down on the shelves, the subtle accumulation of dust in generally inaccessible corners, the smell of wasted food, and above all the heavy silence, occasionally interrupted by hurried footsteps on the upper floor. At lunchtime, when she was called to the staff pantry, Iris passed by the kitchen. The door was ajar, and she couldn't help but look inside. Through the crack, she saw Sophie and Rita trying to feed a small child sitting in a high chair. The boy, with dull eyes and cheeks visibly thinner than they should be, simply turned his face away with each approach of the spoon. Look, Matthew, it's chocolate ice cream. You liked it so much. Sophie's voice was laden with despair. The boy didn't react. He didn't cry, he didn't protest. He just turned his face away with a silent determination that was painfully adult for someone so small. Iris felt something tighten in her chest. That look, she knew it too well. It was the same look she had seen in the mirror so many years ago, when she had lost her own mother as a child in the Louisiana Bayou country. It was the look of someone who had decided, even without knowing how to articulate such a decision, that there was no longer any reason to go on. Without realizing it, she remained there observing far beyond the time she should have. She was startled by Rita's harsh voice. What are you doing standing there? Staff lunch is in the pantry, not here. Iris nodded and walked away, but something had changed in her expression. A silent resolve was taking shape in her thoughts as she mechanically ate the meal served in the pantry. When she finished, she excused herself and, defying all received instructions, headed back to the kitchen. Sophie was alone now, putting away the rejected food with tears in her eyes. Excuse me, Iris said softly. That boy. How long has it been since he ate? Sophie looked at her in surprise, first by her unexpected presence, then by the direct question. Almost a month. Since his mother. She made a vague gesture with her hand, unable to complete the sentence. Mrs. Eliza was with him at that construction site, so it all happened very quickly. Iris absorbed the information in silence, her gaze fixed on the now empty high chair. May I see if there's any fresh French bread? Sophie frowned, confused by the seemingly disconnected request. Yes, it just arrived from the bakery, but why? Iris didn't answer. She walked to the counter where the bread was, took one, cut it in half with precise movements, drizzled it with a generous stream of extra virgin olive oil she found near the stove, and finished with a pinch of salt. What do you think you're doing? Rita's voice sounded from the kitchen entrance. I clearly told you not to meddle. Iris turned calmly, the plate with the bread in her hands. I'm sorry, but I need to try something. I know what that look the boy has means." Before Rita could stop her, Iris walked past her and quickly went up the stairs to the second floor. Following the soft sound of a lullaby coming from one of the rooms, Iris entered Matthew's room with light steps. The environment, delicately decorated in pastel tones, contrasted with the heavy atmosphere that inhabited it. Mrs. Celia, the nurse, was sitting next to the crib, flipping through a magazine with an air of defeat. She looked up, startled by the unexpected presence. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" she asked, standing up. "I'm Iris. I'm covering the cleaning today. I brought something for the boy." Rita, panting from having climbed the stairs behind Iris, appeared at the door. "Mrs. Celia, I apologize." She completely ignored the instructions and— "I just asked for 2 minutes," Iris interrupted with a serenity that silenced both women. "If it doesn't work, I'll leave immediately and accept any consequences." There was something in her voice, a mixture of determination and compassion, that made Mrs. Celia hesitate. "What do you have there?" "Bread with olive oil and salt. Food that embraces," Iris replied. "It's what my grandmother used to make when sadness was greater than hunger." The nurse exchanged a look with Rita. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded. 2 minutes. We've tried everything anyway." Iris approached the crib where Matthew was sitting, staring into space. She didn't speak to him immediately. First, she sat in the armchair beside him, placed the plate on her lap and broke off a piece of bread for herself. She ate slowly, savoring it, as if she were alone in the world. The aroma of fresh olive oil began to fill the room. It was a simple, homemade, comforting smell. Iris continued eating calmly, without haste, without anxiety. Only when she noticed Matthew's curious gaze, the first sign of real interest in weeks, did she smile. "It's delicious, you know," she said softly, as if sharing a secret. "My grandmother used to say that bread made with love always makes the heart beat stronger." To everyone's surprise, Matthew moved slightly towards her. His eyes, previously vacant, now followed the movements of Iris's hands. "Want to try a little piece?" she offered, without extending the bread directly, just bringing the plate closer. The moment that followed seemed to freeze time. Matthew looked at the bread, at Iris, and then, slowly, extended his little hand. He took a tiny fragment and put it in his mouth. He chewed. He swallowed. Rita covered her mouth with her hands. Mrs. Celia held her breath. "More," Matthew said. "One word, the first in almost a month." Iris smiled and placed the plate closer to him. The boy took another piece, larger this time. "It's food that embraces you from the inside," Iris explained softly. "When we eat with an open heart, the food caresses the soul." It was at that exact moment that Thaddeus Meadows appeared at the door, alerted by Sophie about the presence of a stranger in his son's room. What he saw left him paralyzed, Matthew eating on his own, his eyes finally alive. "What's happening here?" he asked, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. Matthew looked at his father and, in a gesture no one expected, raised the little arm holding a piece of bread. "Daddy," he called. "Yummy!" Thaddeus staggered as if his legs couldn't bear the weight of the moment. He approached slowly and knelt before his son. With trembling hands, he accepted the piece offered by the boy and brought it to his mouth. "Yes, son." "Why, it's delicious," he agreed as silent tears ran down his face. That night, after Matthew had finally fallen asleep naturally, without the aid of sleep-inducing medication, Thaddeus summoned Iris to the library. The woman entered the imposing room, filled with books from floor to ceiling, maintaining the same serene dignity she had shown throughout the day. "Madam," Thaddeus began, realizing he didn't know her full name. "Iris Newman," she completed. "Mrs. Newman, I need to understand what happened today." Thaddeus was sitting behind an imposing rosewood desk, but his posture had none of the arrogance that would normally accompany such a setting. He seemed smaller, vulnerable. "How did you achieve what renowned doctors couldn't in weeks?" Iris carefully chose her words. "Mr. Meadows, some pains are so deep that medicine cannot reach them. Your son wasn't rejecting food. He was rejecting a world that had lost its taste. And a simple bread with olive oil solved that. It wasn't the bread, sir. It was the way." Iris paused, searching for the right way to explain. All previous attempts were laden with fear, despair, and haste. The boy felt that. "I offered it without expecting anything in return, without that pleading look. Just presence. Thaddeus reflected on the words for a long moment. Do you have children? No, sir, but I raised my 2 brothers after our mother passed away. I was 12. Iris's eyes revealed for an instant all the harshness of her own story. I know what it's like to look at food and not be able to swallow because sadness occupies all the space. Thaddeus stood up, walked to the window and watched the illuminated city below before making his decision. I want to hire you, not as a day laborer but full-time, to take care of Matthew. Iris showed no surprise, as if she had somehow already expected that proposal. I can consider it, Mr. Meadows, but I have one condition. He turned, surprised by her audacity. Condition? You need to have lunch and dinner with your son every day, in the kitchen without rushing. He needs to see his father eating to feel secure in doing the same. Thaddeus swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. His lunches were usually business meetings in sophisticated restaurants. Dinners were important social events for maintaining contacts. Or at least they were before what happened. I have a company to run, Mrs. Newman, and a son to raise, Mr. Meadows, she retorted, without altering her tone. Matthew didn't just reject food this month. He was rejecting life because he felt he had been rejected. The words struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. He returned to the desk, leaning on it as if needing support. I was by his side day and night, he defended himself, but his voice no longer carried conviction. Physically, yes. But where was your heart, sir? Iris maintained a respectful tone, but her words were as precise as scalpels. Guilt is a luxury parents cannot afford when there is a child who needs them. A heavy silence settled in the library. Outside, Los Angeles continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the drama unfolding in that mansion. Finally, Thaddeus spoke. I accept your condition. When can you start? Tomorrow. The next morning brought a small revolution to the Meadows mansion. Contrary to all expectations, Thaddeus cancelled 3 important meetings and appeared in the kitchen at 8 a.m., wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, a look no one there had seen him wear since his college days. Matthew was already in his high chair, watching Iris cut more fresh bread. When he saw his father, his eyes lit up. Daddy eat? Yes, son. Daddy will eat with you today. Iris instructed Thaddeus to sit beside his son, not across from him. Side by side is better. It shows you're together on the same journey, she explained, as she placed a plate with bread, olive oil, and a little homemade jam on the table. Sophie watched the scene from the sink, barely believing what she saw. The powerful Thaddeus Meadows, whose architectural projects were worth millions, sitting at a simple kitchen table, learning to break bread into small pieces for his son. Like this, Daddy tiny, Matthew explained with the wisdom characteristic of children, showing how he broke his own piece. Thaddeus obeyed, in a role reversal that brought tears to the eyes of all who witnessed it. Aren't you going to sit with us? He asked Iris, who was supervising the scene. Not today. Today is a father and son moment, she replied. But tomorrow I accept the invitation. Throughout that day, Iris explained to Thaddeus what she had perceived. Matthew wasn't rejecting food, but sadness. Each previous attempt was laden with fear and despair, and the child, sensitive as all children are, picked up on these emotions and associated them with food. The focus now isn't nutrition. It's presence, she said as they walked through the garden. Watching Matthew play with colorful blocks, another activity he had abandoned since the accident. We cannot heal the past, Mr. Meadows, but we can anchor the present. That night, for the first time, it was Thaddeus who put his son to sleep. Awkwardly, he tried to read a story, but Matthew didn't seem interested in the sophisticated books on his shelf. Tell a heart story, the boy requested. Touching his father's chest, Thaddeus looked at Iris, confused. Invent one, she suggested softly, the one that comes from the heart. Hesitantly, Thaddeus began, Once upon a time there was a house builder who had a brave little son. To his surprise, the story flowed naturally. He spoke of a boy who helped his father build happy homes for other people, even when his own heart was broken. Matthew listened attentively, his little eyes shining in the dark until sleep arrived, gentle and welcoming. When they left the room, Thaddeus seemed transformed. There was color in his face for the first time in weeks. How did you know? He asked Iris. How did you know exactly what he needed? Iris smiled, a smile that carried as much warmth as melancholy. Because I was also that child one day, Mr. Meadows. I also looked at the plate and saw no reason to eat. Until my grandmother taught me that the simplest food offered with love has the power to heal even the deepest pain. The next morning, Thaddeus went down to the kitchen earlier than agreed. He found Iris already preparing coffee, moving through the space with the naturalness of someone who had always belonged there. "I want to learn how to make bread," he announced. "I want to be able to offer it to my son with my own hands." Iris looked at him with approval. "It's a good start, Mr. Meadows. The dough feels it when it's made in a hurry, you know? Just like people. Let's start with the ingredients." As the flour, water, and yeast mixed under Thaddeus's inexperienced hands, something else also began to transform in that house. A new family recipe was being written, with simple but fundamental ingredients: presence, patience, and that bread which, far beyond nourishing the body, fed the soul. No one noticed when Mrs. Martha Davies, Eliza's mother, arrived for her scheduled visit and stood watching the scene from the kitchen door. Her son-in-law, the renowned architect with flour in his hair, laughing at his own clumsy attempts, while her grandson applauded, sitting in his high chair, with cheeks already visibly fuller. Her gaze met Iris's, and in it there was both a silent question and a veiled threat. Who was this woman? And what was she doing with her family? Mrs. Martha Davies was not a woman of half measures. At 68, she carried the elegant bearing she had acquired over decades as a university professor of Brazilian literature at UCLA. Widowed 15 years ago, she had concentrated all her expectations on her only daughter, Eliza, and now on her grandson Matthew. "What does this mean?" she asked, entering the kitchen with authority, her voice cutting through the moment of relaxation like a sharp blade. Thaddeus turned, still with a smile on his face that faded upon seeing his mother-in-law. Instinctively, he tried to wipe the flour from his hands on the apron he was wearing, a gesture that only worsened his disheveled appearance. "Martha, I wasn't expecting you so soon." "Evidently," she replied, looking meaningfully at the wall clock that read 9:30 a.m., half an hour before the agreed time, her sharp eyes fixed on Iris. "And who is this person?" Before Thaddeus could answer, Matthew exclaimed happily, "Grandma! Bread. Daddy makes bread." Martha's face softened momentarily as she looked at her grandson. It was the first time in weeks she had seen him animated, interacting with color in his cheeks. She approached him and ran her hand through his light brown hair, so much like her daughter's. "Hello, my dear. Grandma brought presents for you." Thaddeus cleared his throat, regaining his composure. "Martha, this is Iris Newman. She's helping us." Iris stepped forward, extending a clean hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Davies. Mr. Meadows hired me to take care of Matthew." Martha ignored the extended hand, turning to her son-in-law. "Hired? And where is Mrs. Celia?" "That very expensive nurse with impeccable references. Mrs. Celia still works with us," Thaddeus clarified, trying to maintain a conciliatory tone. "Iris is helping us in another way." "What way would that be? Turning the kitchen into a playground and you into a baker?" The tone was one of unmistakable disdain. Thaddeus took a deep breath before responding. In other times, he would have yielded to his mother-in-law's pressure, respecting her pain and moral authority as Eliza's mother. But something had changed in him since he saw his son eat that first piece of bread. "Matthew is eating, Martha. He's talking, playing. He's coming back to life." He paused meaningfully. "And Iris is responsible for that." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Martha looked again at her grandson, who continued to play with a small piece of dough, oblivious to the tension between the adults. The change in the child was undeniable. "I'd like to speak with you privately," she finally said, addressing Thaddeus. "Iris," Thaddeus called, "could you stay with Matthew while I talk to Mrs. Martha?" "Of course, Mr. Meadows." When they left the kitchen, Martha turned to her son-in-law in the hallway. "What kind of charlatanism is this? You fired the specialist to hire a domestic helper." Her voice, though low so as not to be heard by her grandson, vibrated with indignation. "I didn't fire anyone, Martha. And I suggest you moderate your tone when speaking of Iris. She accomplished in one day what no specialist could in a month." "With bread and olive oil?" "Please, Thaddeus. And what comes next?" "Miracle cures with herbal teas." Thaddeus crossed his arms, adopting a defensive posture he rarely assumed before his mother-in-law. It's not about miracle cures. It's about presence, genuine affection, something we may have forgotten amidst so much sophistication. The comment struck Martha as a direct criticism, but she didn't back down. Eliza wouldn't approve of this. She always insisted on the best education for Matthew, the best care. The mention of his wife made Thaddeus pale. "Don't use Eliza as an argument, Martha. None of us knows what she would approve of in this situation." A heavy silence settled between them, filled only by the distant sounds of Matthew laughing in the kitchen, a sound they hadn't heard in so long that it seemed almost foreign. "I'll be watching," Martha finally declared, "out of respect for my daughter's memory and for my grandson's good." Thaddeus nodded without the energy to prolong the discussion. "Do that. Observe Matthew. See the difference. And then tell me if you still think I'm wrong." When they returned to the kitchen, they found a scene that momentarily silenced even Martha. Matthew, with his little hands covered in flour, was molding something that vaguely resembled a dough doll, while Iris softly hummed a Louisiana lullaby. "Look, Grandma." "It's you," the boy exclaimed, holding up the shapeless creation. Martha was speechless for an instant, divided between the emotion of seeing her grandson interacting normally and her distrust of the situation. She opted for a middle ground, approaching and observing the doll with forced interest. Very nice. Matthew, very creative. Over the following days, an unusual routine was established in the Meadows mansion. Every morning, Thaddeus woke up early, something unthinkable before, and went down to the kitchen where Iris was already preparing breakfast. Together they made the day's bread. Sometimes Matthew helped, other times he just watched. But he always participated in the ritual of eating together at the simple kitchen table. Thaddeus gradually returned to work, but with a new self-imposed rule, he had lunch at home every day without exception. Important meetings were rescheduled. Clients had to wait. Projects progressed more slowly. To the astonishment of his partners, the world didn't fall apart because of these changes. On a particularly mild afternoon, while Matthew was taking his nap, Thaddeus found Iris in the garden, looking at the small vegetable patch she had started to cultivate at the back of the property. "May I join you?" he asked with a formality that still persisted between them, despite their daily coexistence. "Of course, Mr. Meadows," he smiled slightly. "After all this, am I still Mr. Meadows?" Iris returned the smile. "Habit and respect. I think we deserve something less formal, considering you see me covered in flour every morning. As you prefer, Thaddeus." They sat on a stone bench that offered a view of the city. The contrast between the peace of the garden and the urban frenzy below was remarkable. "I wanted to thank you," he began hesitantly. "Not just for Matthew. For me, too." Iris kept her gaze fixed on the vegetable patch, where small basil and rosemary sprouts were beginning to emerge. "There's nothing to thank me for. I did what anyone with a heart would do." "No," Thaddeus disagreed. "Many people have passed through this house in recent weeks. Doctors, therapists, friends, family, all with good intentions. No one saw what you saw." A bird landed near them, curiously investigating the soil for food. Iris watched it for a moment before replying. "When one knows hunger, true hunger, one learns to recognize it in all its forms." Thaddeus waited for her to elaborate, feeling there was much more to that simple sentence. "I grew up in rural Louisiana," she continued finally, "in a small town called Willow Creek. My mother left us when I was 12, a disease that consumed everything, our resources, our hopes. I was left with 2 younger brothers to raise. How did you survive?" "Any way we could." "I washed clothes, sold sweets at the market, worked in family homes. My brothers, George and Sebastian, also did what they could, shined shoes, carried groceries. But the hardest part wasn't the work." She paused, her eyes now distant, revisiting old memories. "It was maintaining the will to live. In the first few months after losing our mother, I could barely swallow. Food felt like sand in my mouth." Thaddeus watched her, recognizing the same emptiness he had seen in Matthew's eyes. "What changed?" "My grandmother, Josephine. She lived far away, but she came to stay with us for a while. She had no money or education, but she knew things you don't learn in school. One day she took me by the hand, led me to the kitchen and made the simplest bread in the world. Just flour, water, a little yeast and salt. 'Food that embraces,' she would say. She taught me that no matter how much life hurts, the body needs sustenance and the soul needs reasons. And the bread was the reason. Iris smiled. It wasn't just the bread. It was the ritual. Gathering the ingredients, kneading with your hands, waiting for the right time, smelling it when it bakes. It's a lesson in patience, in transformation, in how simple things, when combined with care, become something greater than the sum of their parts. Thaddeus absorbed the words, thinking about how his own life had always been marked by the pursuit of the extraordinary, the impressive. His buildings, his projects, all designed to amaze, to stand out. And yet, what had saved his son was something as basic as a piece of bread. "How did you end up in Los Angeles?" he asked, realizing he knew surprisingly little about the woman who had transformed his home. "When my brothers grew up, we came to try our luck in the capital. George is a bus driver today, married, 3 children. Sebastian works in construction. Who knows, maybe he even helped build one of your projects." She smiled fondly when speaking of her brothers. "I've always worked in family homes. I'm proud of what I do. Cleaning, cooking, caring, these are also forms of love." There was a dignity in Iris that Thaddeus had rarely found in his social life among the Los Angeles elite. A certainty of purpose that didn't depend on external validation. "They are very lucky to have her," he said, unable to conceal his envy. You have me too, Thaddeus, for as long as it's needed." The sentence hung between them, full of unexplored meanings. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the intercom. Rita came to announce that Mrs. Martha had arrived for her daily visit to her grandson. In the weeks that followed, even Martha's resistance began to yield to the evidence. Matthew had not only returned to eating normally, but was regaining lost weight, talking more, playing with renewed energy. And most surprisingly, Thaddeus seemed a different man, less focused on his public image, more present as a father. The perpetual tension that had always inhabited his shoulders gave way to a serenity Martha had never seen in him. Not even during his marriage to Eliza. One evening, after putting Matthew to sleep, Martha found Thaddeus and Iris in the living room, discussing a children's book they had bought for the boy. "May I join you?" she asked with an unusual formality. Thaddeus seemed surprised but nodded. "Of course, Martha. We were just commenting on this book of Louisiana stories that Iris suggested for Matthew." Martha sat down, adjusting her posture as she always did. "Actually, I'd like to talk about something else." She looked directly at Iris. "I want to apologize to you, Mrs. Newman." It was the first time Thaddeus had seen Iris genuinely surprised. "I was prejudiced and arrogant," Martha continued. "I judged your abilities based solely on your occupation and origin. I was wrong." She paused meaningfully. "The good you've done for my grandson and my son-in-law is priceless." Iris accepted the apologies gracefully. "No offense taken, Mrs. Martha. You were protecting your family. It's what grandmothers do." "And mothers," Martha added softly. "It's what mothers do." The allusion to Eliza hung in the room, but without the heavy burden of guilt and recrimination that usually accompanied it. Instead, there was a shared acknowledgement of her absence and a silent acceptance that life needed to go on. The next morning, while Thaddeus was in his office finishing an urgent project, Martha appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual. She found Iris preparing the bread dough, with Matthew in his high chair watching attentively. "Can I learn too?" Martha asked, surprising everyone, including herself. Iris smiled. "Of course. Wash your hands and come over here." That's how Thaddeus found them when he arrived for lunch, his mother-in-law, with hands full of flour, learning to shape a small loaf under Iris's patient guidance, while Matthew clapped at each of his grandmother's advancements. "Good afternoon," he said, stopping at the door, unsure if he was interrupting something important. "Daddy?" Matthew shouted happily. "Grandma makes bread too." Thaddeus approached, observing Martha's work, a small crooked loaf, but made with evident care. "It's beautiful," he commented sincerely. "It's awful," Martha corrected, laughing at herself. Another rare behavior. "But Iris guarantees that the taste doesn't depend on the appearance. What matters is the intention," Iris confirmed. "The dough feels the love in the hands." That afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table, they shared not only the bread Martha had made, but also stories. For the first time, his mother-in-law spoke of Eliza without the conversation being dominated by the pain of loss. She recounted her childhood, how determined she was from a young age, her love for books and architecture, which eventually led her to Thaddeus. She would be proud, Martha said, watching Matthew eat with appetite. To see you two like this. Later, when Matthew was asleep and Martha had already left, Thaddeus found Iris organizing the kitchen for the next day. I never thought I'd see my mother-in-law making bread, he commented, leaning against the doorframe. Iris smiled. Pain is pain, Thaddeus. Rich or poor, educated or not. And healing comes from unexpected places for all of us. He nodded, absorbing the simple wisdom of that woman who had entered his life in such an improbable way. I keep thinking, he began hesitantly. After Matthew is fully recovered, will you leave? The question hung between them, laden with meanings neither was ready to fully explore. Iris stopped what she was doing and looked at him with those eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances. Do you think he will ever fully recover? Thaddeus frowned. Don't you think so? I think he will learn to live with his mother's absence, as we all learn to live with our losses. But there will always be an empty space that nothing and no one can fill. She approached, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough for him to see the sincerity in her eyes. The question is, will that empty space paralyze you, or will it become part of who you are? Before Thaddeus could answer, they heard crying coming from Matthew's room. Not the desperate crying from before, but the soft whimper of a bad dream. Both moved instinctively towards the stairs. I'll go, Iris said. You've had a long day. No, Thaddeus replied, gently placing his hand on her arm. Let's go together. And so they went up side by side to comfort little Matthew, while outside the Los Angeles night covered the city with its mantle of lights. 3 months passed. The mansion in Beverly Hills, once silent as a mausoleum, had transformed. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the corridors. The aroma of fresh bread had replaced the clinical smell of disinfectant, and the grand dining hall, with its imposing mahogany table for 20, remained covered by a white sheet, abandoned in favor of the simple kitchen table. Thaddeus Meadows, once a severe figure in the Los Angeles architectural world, could now frequently be found on his knees on the living room rug, building block towers with Matthew, or imitating the voices of plush dinosaurs. His beard, once rigorously trimmed, had grown a little, giving him a more approachable air. The sparkle had returned to his eyes. Matthew, now 1 year and 10 months old, was flourishing. His full cheeks, exponentially expanding vocabulary, easy laughter. Everything indicated his complete recovery from the traumatic episode. Anyone who saw him playing in the garden or helping Iris in the kitchen would never guess the state he had been in months earlier. And then there was Iris. Her presence in the house, initially seen as temporary, an emergency intervention, had become the axis around which the new family routine revolved. Without fanfare, without drawing attention to herself, she had woven an emotional safety net that supported both father and son. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, while Matthew was taking his nap, Thaddeus found Iris on the veranda, organizing seeds for the small herb garden they cultivated together. I have a proposal for you, he said, sitting in the chair beside her. Iris looked up, curious. The way they addressed each other had become more informal over time, but there was still a certain reserve, an invisible line neither had tried to cross. I'm listening. I received an invitation to present a project in Washington, D.C. next week. It's something important, a sustainable cultural complex that could change the course of the firm. Iris nodded, waiting for him to continue. I wanted you and Matthew to come with me. The surprise was evident on her face. To Washington, D.C.? Yes, it would only be 4 days. We'd stay in a good hotel, near the presentation venue. Matthew could see the city, the monuments, the open sky, and I'd feel more at ease having you two nearby. Iris carefully placed the basil seed packet on the table, gaining time to organize her thoughts. Thaddeus, this would go beyond the limits of my job here. I know, he admitted. That's why it's an invitation, not a request. I'd pay all expenses, of course, and an additional amount for the inconvenience. Something subtly changed in Iris's expression, a shadow Thaddeus couldn't fully interpret. It's not about money, she said calmly. It's about expectations. What would I be on this trip? Matthew's nanny. Yes, she left the sentence incomplete. Thaddeus hadn't considered that angle. In his mind it was simple. They functioned well as a unit here in the house. Why wouldn't they continue that way during the trip? You would be what you've always been to us, he finally replied. Our anchor. The choice of word didn't go unnoticed by Iris. Our. Not mine, not Matthew's, but our. She took a deep breath, aware of being at a crossroads. I need to think, she replied honestly. Can I give you an answer tomorrow? Of course, he agreed, standing up. No pressure. Later that day, as they prepared dinner together, another new house tradition, Iris noticed that Thaddeus seemed worried, frequently checking his phone. Any problem? She asked as she chopped vegetables for the soup. Thaddeus hesitated before answering, as if weighing his words. Richard just informed me he won't be able to do the presentation with me in Washington, D.C. His mother had a health issue. Richard was Thaddeus's oldest partner, practically a brother after 15 years of working together. I'm sorry, Iris said sincerely. Is it serious? Apparently, yes. He'll need to stay in Seattle indefinitely. Thaddeus dropped the phone on the counter, visibly tense. The problem is that Richard knows this project better than anyone. He's the one who developed the entire sustainability aspect, which is precisely the unique selling point. Can't you postpone the presentation? Impossible. There are other firms competing, and the deadlines are inflexible. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Iris already identified as a sign of anxiety. I'll have to dive into the technical details over the weekend. Try to absorb everything I can. Iris continued chopping vegetables thoughtfully. Does that mean working the entire weekend? Unfortunately, yes. I'll have to lock myself in the office with all the documentation. It was at that moment that Matthew ran into the kitchen, freshly awake from his nap with his favorite plush dinosaur. Daddy! Play now. Thaddeus knelt, hugging his son. Champ, Daddy will need to work a lot over the next few days. It's a very, very important job. Matthew's smile wavered slightly. But you promised the park tomorrow. Thaddeus closed his eyes for a second, clearly torn. Iris saw the conflict written all over his face, the same dilemma that so many parents face, the demands of work versus the emotional needs of their children. I'll take him to the park, she offered softly. Are you sure? It's your day off. Iris smiled. I am. It'll be fun. Yay! With Iris, Matthew exclaimed, using the affectionate nickname he had created for Iris. Thaddeus looked at the two of them, a complex expression on his face, gratitude mixed with something more, something he himself seemed reluctant to name. Thank you, he simply said. On Sunday afternoon, while Thaddeus remained immersed in work in the home office, Iris returned from the park with an exhausted but happy Matthew. After putting him to sleep, she went down to prepare coffee and take it to the architect. As she approached the half-open office door, she heard voices. Thaddeus was not alone. She immediately recognized Mrs. Martha's elegant timbre. Concerned about what's happening here, Thaddeus, the lady was saying. Don't get me wrong. I acknowledge all the good this woman has done for you, but there are limits that need to be respected. Iris froze, the tray with coffee in her hands. What limits would those be, Martha? Thaddeus's voice sounded tired but firm. The limits between employees and family. Between gratitude and something more. There was a tense pause. Eliza has only been gone for 4 months, Thaddeus. I don't believe you're implying what I think you are. I'm not implying anything. I'm observing. The way you look at her, how you depend on her emotionally. This trip to Washington, D.C. together. Matthew needs her, Thaddeus defended himself. And yes, I do too. She saved our lives, Martha, literally. And I am eternally grateful for that. But saving lives doesn't give someone the right to occupy places that are not theirs. What place would that be? Thaddeus's tone hardened. There was an audible sigh from Martha. Eliza's place. Iris felt a tightness in her chest, as if something cold and hard had struck her. Silently, she took a step back, deciding not to deliver the coffee. No one is trying to replace Eliza, Thaddeus replied, his voice lower now but clear enough for Iris to hear. No one could, even if they tried. Then why are you taking this woman to Washington, D.C.? Why don't you hire a professional nanny for the trip? Or ask me to stay with Matthew here? Do because Matthew trusts her. Because she knows our routines, our needs, because... He paused. Because we feel safe with her. And after the trip, and after Matthew is fully adapted, what will her role be then? The question hung in the air unanswered. Iris slowly walked away, taking the tray back to the kitchen, her heart heavy with conflicting thoughts. Later that night, after Mrs. Martha had left, Iris found Thaddeus still in his office, surrounded by papers and 3D printed models. "I brought some tea," she said, placing the cup on the table. "Chamomile with a little honey." "Thank you," he replied, rubbing his tired eyes. "How was the park?" "Wonderful." Matthew met other boys, played in the sand, fed bread to the ducks in the pond. "I took some photos on my phone if you'd like to see them." Thaddeus smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his exhausted face. "I'd love to." As she showed him the images of his son playing, running, smiling, Thaddeus felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost suffocated him. Without Iris, he would have lost these moments, not just the photographs, but Matthew's very ability to experience them. "About Washington, D.C., Iris began after they finished looking at the photos. "I've made my decision." Thaddeus straightened in his chair, trying to read her expression. "I'll go with you," she said. "Matthew will be more at ease in an unfamiliar environment if I'm nearby. But," she paused meaningfully, "we need to define some boundaries." Thaddeus felt a shiver run down his spine, remembering the conversation with Martha. Had Iris heard? "What boundaries?" he asked cautiously. "I'll stay in a separate room, obviously. I'll take care of Matthew while you're in meetings, but I'll have a few hours off daily to explore the city on my own. And—" she took a deep breath. "When we get back, I think we need to talk about my long-term role in this house." Thaddeus swallowed hard. "Are you thinking of leaving?" The question came out more vulnerable than he intended, almost a whisper. "I'm thinking that Matthew is recovering well. That you are too. That at some point you both will need to carry on without my constant help. And if we don't want to." The question escaped before Thaddeus could contain it. Iris's eyes met his, and there was a moment of silent understanding between them, a recognition that something had changed, something that went beyond gratitude or professional relationship. "Then we'll have to talk about that too," she finally replied. "But not now. Now you need to focus on the presentation, and I need to prepare Matthew's things for the trip." The following Tuesday, the Meadows Architecture private jet landed at Washington, D.C.'s airport under an impressively blue sky. Matthew, who had never flown before, was too excited to feel fear. He spent the entire flight glued to the window, pointing at clouds and tiny houses below. The chosen hotel was located near the National Mall, with a view of the Esplanade of Ministries. Thaddeus had reserved a suite with 2 rooms connected by a common living area, an arrangement that respected the boundaries set by Iris, but allowed them to be close. "Tomorrow is the big day," Thaddeus said as they unpacked. "The presentation is scheduled for 10 a.m. "You'll be ready," Iris affirmed confidently. "You've rehearsed enough." "I'm not so sure. Richard knew these technical details much better than I do." Matthew ran around the room, exploring every corner, oblivious to his father's tension. "Everything will be fine," Iris assured him. "While you're at the presentation, I'll take Matthew to see the Washington Monument. I hear the view is incredible." "And then we can have lunch together?" Thaddeus asked. "If the meeting doesn't take too long, yes. Otherwise, don't worry. We'll manage just fine, won't we, Matthew?" The boy ran back, hugging Iris's legs. "Yes." Iris and Matt adventure. Thaddeus smiled, observing the two of them. "You make a good team." That night, after Matthew fell asleep, Thaddeus invited Iris to have coffee on the hotel terrace. The night view of Washington, D.C., with its illuminated monuments and the unique urban design, created an almost unreal setting. "I never imagined I'd be here like this," he confessed, looking at the city. "Presenting an important project?" Iris asked. "No, at peace," he turned to face her. "After the accident, I thought I would never feel anything but guilt and pain again." Iris lowered her eyes to her teacup. "The pain hasn't disappeared, Thaddeus. You've just learned to live with it." "Thanks to you." "No, thanks to your strength. I merely showed the way." The silence that followed was laden with unspoken words, unexpressed feelings. It was Iris who finally broke it. "I overheard your conversation with Mrs. Martha on Sunday." Thaddeus closed his eyes briefly. "I imagined so. By the way you spoke about boundaries afterwards. She's worried, and I understand why. I'm a stranger who entered your lives at a moment of extreme vulnerability." "You're not a stranger," he protested. "Not anymore. To the outside world I am. The domestic helper who somehow got too close to the widowed employer. There was a bitter note in her voice that Thaddeus rarely heard. What matters is what we are to each other, not what the world thinks. And what are we, Thaddeus? The direct question caught him off guard. You are... He searched for the right words. Part of our family now. Matthew adores you. He hesitated. You. Before Thaddeus could answer, his phone rang. It was Richard, calling from Seattle to discuss one last crucial detail of the presentation. When he hung up 20 minutes later, the moment had passed. Iris stood up. It's better we rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. Thaddeus nodded, feeling simultaneously relieved and disappointed by the interruption. Good night, Iris. Good night, Thaddeus. And good luck tomorrow. The next morning brought an unusual cloudy sky to Washington, D.C. Thaddeus left early for the presentation, dressed in his best suit, projecting a confidence he didn't fully feel. Iris and Matthew accompanied him to the hotel lobby. Remember what we agreed? Iris asked the boy. We're going to send positive energy for Daddy to shine in the meeting. Matthew nodded, vigorously and Daddy champion. Thaddeus knelt, hugging his son. Thank you, champ. Afterwards, I want to hear all about the Washington Monument, okay? Okay. As he stood up, his eyes met Iris's. Thank you, he simply said. Oh, go on. Show your worth. The journey to the presentation venue was short, but for Thaddeus it felt like an eternity. His mind alternated between the technical details he needed to master and thoughts about the unfinished conversation with Iris the night before. What were they to each other? The question echoed in his mind as he entered the modernist building that housed the Cultural Project's headquarters. How could he define what Iris meant to him and Matthew? It was more than gratitude, more than professional respect. But would it be appropriate to name that feeling so soon after losing Eliza? And how did Iris truly feel? Was she merely doing her job, with the dedication she showed in everything she did? These questions accompanied him to the meeting room, where government representatives and potential investors awaited him. When he began the presentation, however, something unexpected happened. His voice found firmness, his ideas flowed with clarity. As he spoke about sustainability, social inclusion, and the integration between architecture and nature, he realized he wasn't just repeating Richard's words. He was expressing his own vision, enriched by the transformative experience of the past few months. Architecture isn't just about building structures, he concluded, looking directly at the evaluation committee. It's about creating spaces that nurture the human spirit, spaces where people can reconnect with themselves and with what truly matters. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Iris and Matthew enjoyed the panoramic view of the Capitol from the Washington Monument. The boy was fascinated by the vastness of the horizon, by the unique layout of the city seen from above. Everything tiny, he exclaimed, pointing at the buildings below. It's like looking at the world differently, Iris explained. Sometimes we need to change our perspective to see better. It was at that moment, observing the planned city with its clean lines and open spaces, that Iris made a decision that would change the course of their lives and complete the transformation that had begun with a simple piece of bread months ago. Thaddeus left the presentation room with shoulders lighter than he had felt in months. Not only had the project been well received, with murmurs of approval and positive nods throughout his speech, but the very act of defending those ideas had renewed his passion for architecture. For the first time since the accident, he felt he could reconcile his career with his new reality as a single father. His cell phone vibrated in his pocket. A message from Iris with a photo of Matthew smiling broadly at the Washington Monument, the city stretching out like a living map behind him. Your champ waiting to hear how it went. We're at the park near the monument. Thaddeus smiled at the screen, feeling that now familiar tightness in his chest, a mixture of gratitude, affection, and something deeper he hadn't fully named yet. He quickly replied, It was incredible. I'm coming to meet you. In the taxi on the way to the park, he reflected on how his life had changed drastically in such a short time. 6 months ago he was plunged into despair, watching helplessly as his son withered, unable to process the loss of his mother. Now, despite the pain that would always be present, he had found a new balance, a new way of being a family, and Iris was the center of this transformation. The park was a green oasis in the planned heart of Washington, D.C. Thaddeus easily spotted them. Matthew was running after a colorful balloon, while Iris watched him from a bench, her face illuminated by that serene smile that seemed never to waver. "Daddy!" Matthew shouted upon seeing him, running towards him like a small hurricane of energy. Thaddeus knelt, opening his arms to receive the impact of that small but vigorous body. "Hey there, champ! Did you like the view up there? Saw everything. Everything tiny. And I ate popcorn." "How wonderful. And did you behave well with Iris?" "Yes, I'm a good boy." Thaddeus looked up at Iris, who was approaching calmly. "He was an angel," she confirmed. He charmed everyone at the monument with his enthusiasm. Standing up with Matthew in his arms, Thaddeus couldn't contain his own enthusiasm. They loved the project. "The committee chairman practically guaranteed will be chosen." "I knew it," Iris replied with a confidence that surprised him. "You were prepared. More than you think." There was something different in her eyes today, a decision made, a new clarity. Thaddeus immediately noticed the change but couldn't interpret it. "Shall we have lunch to celebrate?" he suggested. "Of course." "Matthew is hungry again, isn't he?" The boy nodded vigorously. "Wolf hungry!" They chose a nearby restaurant, with outdoor tables under leafy trees. While waiting for their order, Matthew animatedly colored a drawing the waiter had kindly brought him. The moment was perfect, tranquil, harmonious, almost mundane in its domestic simplicity. But for Thaddeus, who had known the abyss of despair, every second of that normality was a miracle. "When do we go back to Los Angeles?" Iris asked after Matthew was distracted by a family of birds in a nearby tree. "Tomorrow afternoon. I thought we could use the morning to show you more of the city." Iris nodded, taking a sip of water before saying, "We need to talk before we go back." There was a seriousness in her voice that made Thaddeus sit up straighter. "About what we talked about last night?" "Yes, about what we are, and what we can be." Thaddeus suddenly felt his mouth dry. "You're right. It's an important conversation. We can talk after Matthew falls asleep, on the hotel terrace." "Agreed." The rest of lunch passed in a slightly tense atmosphere, despite both their efforts to maintain a relaxed mood for Matthew's sake. The boy, oblivious to the emotional currents flowing between the adults, ate with appetite and told imaginative stories about the birds he was watching. Back at the hotel, Matthew was exhausted from the day's adventures. He fell asleep quickly after his bath, lulled by a story about a boy who traveled through the sky of Washington, D.C. in a magic balloon, told by Thaddeus with Iris's help, who added colorful details to the narrative. When they finally met on the terrace, the sun was already setting, painting the Washington, D.C. sky with dramatic shades of orange and red. There were few other guests there, most absorbed in their own conversations, creating a bubble of privacy around them. "So," Thaddeus began, after an initial silence, "about last night." Iris took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "First of all, I want you to know that it was never my intention to create a complicated situation. When I entered that house, my only goal was to help a suffering child." "I know that," Thaddeus assured her. "I never doubted your intentions. But things have changed, haven't they?" She looked directly at him, her dark eyes reflecting the city lights. "What started as a job has transformed into something more." "Yes," he simply agreed. "What Mrs. Martha said about me occupying Eliza's place—" "She's wrong," Thaddeus interrupted firmly. "No one could take Eliza's place. She will always be Matthew's mother. She will always have her space in our lives and memories." Iris nodded. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Because I need you to understand. I don't want to replace anyone. I cannot and do not wish to erase the past. So what do you want, Iris?" The question came out more direct than Thaddeus intended, but it was too late to take it back. She smiled, that soft smile that had become an essential part of their daily lives. "I want to continue being a part of your lives, but we need to be honest about what that means." Thaddeus swallowed hard, feeling simultaneously anxious and hopeful. "And what does it mean to you?" "It means that we outgrew the employee-employer relationship a long time ago. That what I feel for Matthew goes beyond professional care. And that what I feel for you—" She paused, searching for the right words. "It wasn't planned. It shouldn't have happened. But it did happen," Thaddeus completed, his voice almost a whisper. Yes, and now we need to decide what to do about it. The moment of truth had arrived. Thaddeus knew that his answer would change everything, for better or for worse. Iris, you brought life back to our home when all seemed lost. You saved my son when no one else could. You taught me to be a real father, to be present, to value what is essential. He took a deep breath before continuing. It would be easy to say that what I feel is just gratitude. But that would be a lie. Her eyes shone under the terrace lights. I'm afraid, Thaddeus confessed, afraid that it's too soon. Afraid of what people will say, afraid of betraying Eliza's memory. But I'm even more afraid of losing you. I have my fears too, Iris admitted. Afraid that what you feel is just disguised gratitude. Afraid that the differences between us, of origin, class, education, will eventually weigh too heavily. Afraid of not being accepted into your world. My world now is that kitchen where we make bread together. It's Matthew's room where we tell stories. It's anywhere the three of us are. Iris smiled, emotional, but there was still hesitation in her eyes. There's something else I need to tell you, she said, in a tone that immediately alerted Thaddeus. Something I discovered today looking at Washington, D.C. from the top of the monument. What? I received a job offer in Miami. A former employer who moved there a few years ago found out I was in Los Angeles and contacted me. She offered a better salary, a small apartment, the chance to be closer to my brothers. Thaddeus felt as if the ground opened beneath his feet. Are you going to accept? Initially, I thought so. I thought it would be the solution to this impasse, to Mrs. Martha's glances, to the unanswered questions between us. She paused meaningfully. But then I saw Matthew looking at the city from up there, so amazed, so full of life. And I realized I couldn't do it. Couldn't do what? Leave you both, even if it might be the most sensible thing. A profound relief flooded Thaddeus. So, you're not going to Miami? I don't know yet. It depends. On what? On us being honest about what we want, about who we are to each other. Thaddeus hesitated no more. He covered her hand with his on the table. I want you to stay, Iris, not as an employee, not as a nanny, as a partner, in every sense that word can have. Her eyes filled with restrained tears. Are you sure that's what you want? It's not simple, Thaddeus. People will talk. Your mother-in-law. Let them talk. Martha will eventually understand when she sees that we are not disrespecting Eliza's memory, just continuing to live. At that moment, a gentle breeze blew across the terrace, bringing, with it, the distinct aroma of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. Both noticed it at the same time and smiled at the synchronicity. Food that embraces, Iris murmured. How you embraced our lives, Thaddeus replied, gently squeezing her hand. Back in Los Angeles, the mansion in Beverly Hills underwent subtle but significant changes. Iris's room, previously located on the staff floor, was moved to the main floor near Thaddeus's and Matthew's. The formal living room, which they rarely used, was transformed into a play space for the boy, with colorful rugs and educational toys. Mrs. Martha's reaction was exactly as they expected. Initially cold, then resigned, and finally, seeing Matthew's evident happiness and Thaddeus's rebirth, reluctant acceptance. I never intended for this to happen, Iris told her one afternoon, when they were alone in the kitchen preparing a cake for Matthew's second birthday. Martha mixed the batter with more vigor than necessary. I believe you. And to be fair, Thaddeus is an adult man, free to make his own choices. There will always be space for Eliza in his life, in our lives. Martha stopped mixing the batter, looking directly at Iris. That's what worries me most. That with time she might be forgotten. I will never allow that to happen, Iris promised, with a seriousness that surprised the lady. Matthew will know who his mother was, how much she loved him, how brave and brilliant she was. It's part of my role to ensure that. Something subtly changed in Martha's gaze. It wasn't yet complete acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of an understanding. I have something to show you, Iris said, taking a small object from her apron pocket. It was a miniature locket, one of those carried as a pendant. I had it made for Matthew. It has Eliza's photo inside, so he can always have her close, even when he can't see her. Martha took the object with trembling hands, opening it to find A radiant photo of her daughter, smiling under the sun of some happy day from the past. "Was this your idea?" she asked, her voice choked. "Yes. I believe that absence can be presence in another way. We don't need to pretend that those who are gone never existed. We can honor, remember, include." The tears Martha had been holding back since the conversation finally escaped. "Thank you," she simply said. The next day, Matthew's birthday was celebrated with a modest but joyful party in the garden. There was banana cake made by 6 hands. Thaddeus, Matthew, and Iris had had fun in the kitchen that morning, with broken eggs on the floor, flour everywhere, and many more laughs than complaints. Mrs. Martha brought a photo album of Eliza as a child, which Matthew leafed through with genuine interest. "Mommy tiny like Matt," he exclaimed, pointing to a photo where Eliza, about 2 years old, was playing on a beach. "Yes, darling, your mother was also a child one day," Martha confirmed, her voice surprisingly firm. In a quiet moment, when Matthew was playing with the few invited friends, Thaddeus approached Iris, who was arranging the sweets on a tray. "How did you manage it?" he asked in a low voice. "Manage what?" "Martha. She's different with you." Almost friendly, Iris smiled. "By showing that I respect the past, that I don't want to erase anything, just add to it." Thaddeus looked at her with admiration. "You're extraordinary, you know." "I'm just practical," she corrected with a smile. "Like bread, simple, honest, unpretentious, but essential." That night, after the guests had left and Matthew had finally fallen asleep, exhausted but radiant, Thaddeus and Iris sat on the veranda, contemplating the lights of Los Angeles. "You know what I thought today, watching Matthew blow out the candles?" Thaddeus commented. "What?" "That the wish I made 6 months ago came true." "And what was it?" "That we would find a way to be happy again, even after everything." Iris leaned her head on his shoulder. "You did more than wish. You worked for it. You had the courage to change, to open up, to learn." "I had a good teacher," he replied, gently kissing the top of her head. The next day, after breakfast, Matthew surprised everyone with a request. "I want to make bread by myself today." Thaddeus and Iris exchanged amused glances. "By yourself?" his father asked. "It's a difficult job for such small hands." "Yes, Matt, big now." Iris knelt before him. "How about you be the chief baker, and Daddy and I will be your assistants?" The proposal seemed to satisfy the boy, who immediately adopted an air of command, authoritatively pointing where everyone should stand in the kitchen. As they separated the ingredients under the demanding supervision of the little one, Thaddeus whispered to Iris, "It's impressive how much he's transformed in these months." "Children are stronger and more adaptable than we imagine," she replied. "They teach us to move forward." Matthew, impatient with the side conversation, clapped his hands. "Attention, let's begin." With gentle guidance, they allowed him to put the ingredients in the bowl. Too much flour, too little water, an alarming amount of salt that they discreetly corrected when he got distracted. "Now knead," Matthew announced, plunging his little hands into the mixture with enthusiasm, splattering flour everywhere. Thaddeus and Iris helped him, turning the work into play. Laughter echoed through the kitchen, filling every corner of the house that had once been silent as a tomb. "Look, it's growing," Matthew exclaimed, marveling, watching the dough resting in the bowl beginning to ferment. "It's like magic, isn't it?" Iris commented. "The ingredients transform into something completely new." "Like us," Thaddeus added softly, just for her to hear. When the bread finally came out of the oven, uneven, too dark in some parts, too light in others, Matthew couldn't have been prouder. "I made it! Matt's bread!" Sitting at the simple kitchen table, they shared that imperfect bread with the solemnity of those celebrating much more than a meal. Every piece, every bite, symbolized the journey they had traveled together, from despair to renewal, from loss to reconstruction. "Is it good?" Matthew asked anxiously, watching the adults chew. "It's delicious," Thaddeus assured him. "The best bread I've ever eaten," Iris added. And it was true, though not for culinary reasons. It was the best because it represented the completeness of a cycle, from the first bread that saved Matthew to the bread he now prepared himself, a narrative of healing written in flour, water, and salt. That night, while helping Matthew brush his teeth before bed, Thaddeus noticed a new drawing hanging on the bathroom wall, one of the many his son produced daily, but this one seemed special. "What's this, champ?" he asked, pointing to the 3 colorful figures holding hands. "It's our family," Matthew simply replied. "Daddy, Matt, and Iris." Then pointing to a 4th smaller figure floating above them, "and Mommy in heaven watching." Thaddeus felt emotion tighten his throat. "It's beautiful, son." "We're happy now, right, Daddy?" "Yes, champ. We are very happy." Later, lying beside Iris in their room, Thaddeus told her about the drawing. "He has an incredible perception for someone so small," she commented, emotional. "He learned from you. This ability to integrate the past and the present without denial, without pretense." Iris intertwined her fingers with his. "Sometimes I think about how strange the path was that brought us here, how something as simple as bread with olive oil changed so many lives." "It wasn't the bread," Thaddeus corrected, repeating the words she herself had said months earlier. "It was the presence. It was love without expectation." The next day, a letter arrived from the Washington, D.C. committee. Thaddeus's project had been unanimously approved. It was the greatest professional achievement of his career, and curiously, it no longer seemed as defining of his identity as it would have in the past. When he gave the news to Iris, her first reaction was genuine joy for him. The second was practical. "Are we going to have to travel to Washington, D.C. a lot in the coming months?" "Probably, but this time the 3 of us will go officially. As a family." Her smile lit up the room. "As a family," she repeated, savoring the words. That afternoon, while Matthew was taking his nap, Thaddeus found Iris in the garden, tending to the small vegetable patch that now flourished with aromatic herbs, vegetables, and even some flowers. It was a microcosm of what they had built together, life where before there had only been barren land. "I never properly thanked you," he said, approaching. "For what?" "For disobeying Rita's orders that first day. For going up to Matthew's room when you shouldn't have." Iris smiled, remembering. "Some rules need to be broken, and some hearts mended," he completed, gently pulling her into a hug. They stayed like that for a moment, in silence, feeling the afternoon sun on their faces, the aroma of herbs in the air, the distant sound of Los Angeles around them. An island of peace built with simple ingredients: presence, patience, shared bread. "What do you think about inviting your brothers for dinner here on Sunday?" Thaddeus suddenly suggested. "I want to get to know them better. They're part of your life, so they're part of ours now." Iris's eyes shone with contained emotion. They'd be honored and nervous. "Tell them not to worry. We'll eat in the kitchen as always. Nothing formal. And Mrs. Martha, she's also invited if she wants to come. It's time to mix all parts of our story, don't you think? Like ingredients in a new recipe." Iris nodded, wrapping him in a tighter embrace. "Yes, a recipe we continue to write every day." On Sunday morning, the Meadows Mansion kitchen was bustling with activity. George and his wife Amanda had brought their 3 children. Sebastian had come alone, still shy in an environment he considered intimidating, despite his sister's assurances. Mrs. Martha arrived punctually, bringing a milk pudding she had made herself, a gesture of integration that did not go unnoticed. Matthew ran among the adults, delighted by the presence of other children, especially George's children, only a few years older than him. "Daddy, can I show my toys to my cousins?" "Of course, champ. But don't climb on the chairs, okay?" As the children ran to the living room, the adults organized themselves in the enlarged kitchen, one of the first modifications Thaddeus had made to the house, tearing down a wall to integrate the staff pantry into the main space. There was no longer any separation. It was a single environment where everyone worked together. George, overcoming his initial nervousness, recounted stories of their childhood in Louisiana, making everyone laugh with the mischief he and Sebastian got into, while Iris, still a child herself, tried to maintain some order. She was always like that, you know. The responsible one. The one who took care of everyone, he explained to Thaddeus. Sometimes we forgot she was just a girl too. Iris, preparing the dough for a shepherd's pie with dried beef, a tutty, typical Deep South dish she had decided to introduce to the family. smiled at the memory. Someone needed to make sure those two didn't burn down the house. And now look, George continued, with evident pride in his voice. My sister, in a Beverly Hills mansion. Who would have thought? The mansion that was lucky to find her, Thaddeus corrected, with a sincerity that momentarily silenced the kitchen. Mrs. Martha, who was peeling potatoes with surprising dexterity for someone who rarely cooked, looked up. I agree, she simply said, causing general astonishment. When they finally sat down for lunch, a makeshift table with planks on trestles to accommodate everyone on the veranda, the atmosphere was one of celebration. Iris's shepherd's pie, George's rice, Amanda's vinaigrette, Mrs. Martha's pudding, Thaddeus's bread, and even the slightly melted chocolate truffles Sebastian had bought at the bakery formed a feast that transcended the sum of its parts. Before they began to eat, Matthew surprised everyone by asking, "Candle. We need a little candle." "It's no one's birthday, son," Thaddeus explained, confused. "But Iris's grandma always lit a candle to say thank you for happy days," he insisted, looking at Iris for confirmation. Iris smiled, emotional as she realized she had told the boy that story. "It's true. My grandmother Josephine believed that gratitude needed to be marked with a concrete gesture. A little candle lit to remember that there is light even on the darkest days." Without hesitation, Mrs. Martha took a white candle from her purse, part of the set she had brought for the pudding. Thaddeus lit it, placing it in the center of the table. "To family," he toasted, raising his glass. "In all its forms." "To family," everyone replied in unison. As they ate, talked and laughed under the mild Sunday sun, the candle flame danced softly, illuminating faces that, though different in many aspects, were united by something essential. The desire to belong, to nurture, to continue. Observing the scene, Matthew among his new cousins, Mrs. Martha animatedly chatting with Amanda about recipes, her brothers finally relaxed, Thaddeus radiating a quiet happiness, Iris felt a deep certainty settle in her heart. The certainty that sometimes the most important nourishment we can offer someone is not what satisfies the hunger of the body, but the hunger of the soul. As her grandmother always said, food that embraces, a heart that stays. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Thaddeus, Matthew, and Iris's story has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about new beginnings and transformations. Find it here by clicking to the left of the video. If this narrative about how love can manifest in the simplest and most powerful forms moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the power of small gestures. Share in the comments, what was the moment in this story that touched your heart the most? Thank you for being with us on this journey, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow with a new story that will warm your soul as much as freshly baked bread.